Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So here we go. I love it. It is May, and as it should be in the month of May, the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks in the playoffs. Game 1 is upon us. And I was just looking at video of games of yesteryear and reading about it, and I mean, all of it seems like yesterday to me, but just it all just comes flooding back, like the magic of all of it. It was such a dynamic rivalry in the 90s. It is true. Todd Meyer, our executive producer, was just in here and was talking about the 2014 series where the Pacers won in 6, Roy Hibbert had the epic block. That does feel, and it is, I mean, for good reason. You know, that's the outlier because it's really it's the only series there in a 25-year period. But in the 90s, 93, 94, 95, 98, 99, I mean, good Lord. Knicks winning the first 2, Pacers winning 2, and then obviously 2000 also, but, you know, the Knicks in 99, then the Pacers in 2000. So perfectly spaced, perfectly balanced in terms of which franchise wins, and just so much history between the two. And here we are again.
There's still time, by the way. I sort of fibbed tinily on Twitter. My apologies for that. I lied on Thursday night, said I was going to watch it Friday, pushed it back to Sunday, but I did rewatch the 30 for 30 by ESPN, Winning Time, Reggie Miller versus the New York Knicks. For those of you that, I always loved the doc at the time because it came out and I got to re-experience that with my brothers who were, you know, in their early adulthood years when that series took place. I was, you know, towards the back end. More of my earliest memories of that was when they went to the finals after they beat the Knicks in 2000 to go against the Lakers. But those early series, it was cool to re-experience that. That documentary is now about 14 years old. But it still holds up, and you have a lot of great interview conversations throughout that entire thing. Reggie, of course, the focal point. They have Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason, the Davis twins. In general, a collection of everybody involved with that. Donnie Walsh featured heavily in it, the late Mel Daniels, Mark Boyle. If you're looking to encapsulate it and you have 7 hours to do it, if you have some free time, it's about an hour and 10. But that doc, I've always felt like, especially for those that either didn't live it and are just hoping to like get a sprinkling of what it was like, or for those that did that are looking for a quick trip down memory lane, that doc pretty much covers everything of those two franchises in their collision course and what those series in the 90s were and what they took out of all the parties involved, Jake.
It's really interesting because of the series and the history of the series between the Pacers and the Knicks. And I guess everybody that lived through it would have different opinion. I can totally see how, and the funny thing is from the Pacers standpoint, the most impactful and the most important would be the 2000 series because that's what lifted Indiana into the NBA Finals for their only time in NBA history. So the 2000 series is by far the most significant. And I'm curious, for Pacer fans, I would like to know this, okay? And you can tweet me at Jake Query, Jakequeuery, or as always, you can always send me your answer via text at 317-523-9288. So 317-523-9288. And I would like to know which series is the one that you most remember, that you have the most fond memory of. And this is the history right here. 93, the first time they played, that was the John Starks headbutt year. The Knicks 1-4. It was a best of 5 series. 94, That was the Spike Lee choke game in Game 5. Pacers come back here, have a chance to close it in 6. Spike Lee shows up. There's tractors on Market Square, and Knicks win it in 7. But that was the 25-point fourth quarter, 39-point game in Game 5 for Reggie Miller, introducing the Reggie Miller-Spike Lee rivalry. 95. 8 points in 9 seconds in Game 1. Ewing finger roll misses in Game 7 in the Garden. Pacers win in 7. 98. Pacers, best team they had. They win in 5. They go on to play Chicago in the Eastern Conference Finals. 99. LJ 4-point play. Knicks win in 6. Strike-shortened season. Many thought Pacers best team. 2000, the aforementioned, and then the 2014 Pacers in 6 to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and where they played Miami, I believe. So that's the series. For me personally, the one with which I carry the most reverence, believe it or not, and it's odd because of the fact that, A, they didn't even win the series, but to me, the biggest one was 94. Because that's the Reggie choke game, the 25 points in the fourth, 39-point game, but that was the arrival. That year was the one where it was like, holy cow, they've broken through. They got to because it was also the Eastern Conference Finals. 95 was the semifinals. That was the first time, and I know 95 is when they broke through and beat them, but to me, 94 is the one that it was like, holy cow, this team is for real, and Reggie Miller is a bona fide star. But, Jake, 1995, I felt like we won the NBA title. I agree, it was huge. My buddy Greg, 94 for sure, with Reggie scoring all of those points. Jake, 94 because we found out who Reggie Miller was. Just remember watching with my dad and laughing hysterically at the shots he was hitting that night from Richie. Richie, you're right. I mean, I remember the one shot that he hit. Look at this shot. I mean, on NBC, they're like, what in the world is happening here? It was, and you know what's funny, Jimmy, is now guys score 39 like routinely.
But they do it from areas where he was pulling up. Like that, again, I'm speaking from, and just for a segment of our audience that I know match my timeline and, some extent as well, match Eddie's timeline. I was 6 months old when they get through in 95, or 4 months old when they get through in 95. So, like, my memories are secondary, are of documentaries, are of people that, like, my siblings that grew up through it. So, yes, I didn't, like, witness it and experience it all, but I've consumed enough of it to have bearings with it. And to your point about the shots that Reggie made in 94, they had on a number of different coaches in the Winning Time documentary, including Larry Brown. And this came out in 2010. Again, this is just pre-Steph Curry. Like, this is Steph Curry has not reinvented the league for what long-range shooting is. And yes, to be fair, some of the spots where Larry Brown, I think, says in the doc, you had to pull up and guard him in half court. Like, don't let him get. They had a Pat Riley. He's like, no airspace. Like, once he crosses half court, you got to stop him. And yes, some of those, even for Steph Curry, would make him blush in terms of the range.
But it was just a different style of play back then.
And even with the documentary that filmed in like 08 and 09, they're talking about it in like, oh, you've never seen anything like this before. And for some people younger than me, it might be like, oh, well, we've seen Steph do that. Sure, but at the time, nobody did that with that kind of confidence and bravado.
I mean, he scored 39 in an era where teams were scoring, winning games 90 to 85, right? Totally different era. But game 1 tonight, going to be a lot of fun. We're going to take a long look at that. As a matter of fact, the guy that assembled and built those teams for the New York Knicks, for the Pacers to go against the New York Knicks in the 90s, and then later was the general manager of the New York Knicks. Donnie Walsh going to join us, 2 o'clock today. Mike Greenberg, you just listened to. The New York, and for that matter, he covered the Bulls as well, perspective of those Pacers teams, and what he anticipates for Pacers-Knicks, the 2024 variation. Mike Greenberg at 1 o'clock today. Mike Chappell joining us at 12:30. Colts getting back, at least for the younger players, rookie minicamp starting in earnest on Friday. So we will talk to Chap about that. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. You just heard Jimmy Cook, Eddie Garrison here as well. It is Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan on a good start to the week on a Monday. Matter of fact, I just got back from, and I'm excited for people once we get done with it to be able to see this in terms of the Gold Badge series that I do for the station website, getting set for the 500. Ed Carpenter, I think everybody knows, is a local guy. Of course, his father, Tony George, the former owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and family through and through. And Ed and Tony and Ed's brother, they all live in, as they call it, a compound on the north side of Indianapolis. And Ed was kind enough this morning to let myself, Nick Cottingen, our coworker, and David Woods, our videographer, over to his house to show just the life that they've built for themselves there on the north side of Indianapolis. Everything from a private pond to a pet mallard to an impressive sports memorabilia collection. Look forward to showing all of that to everybody as we get set for the Indy 500. But that's how the day started for me, and a little sore from the Mini on Saturday. But we'll get into that. Jimmy, how was your weekend?
It was spectacular, Jake. I'll keep it very, very brief. Cook family and friends party for the Kentucky Derby was Saturday. I know you were recovering from your successful mini marathon run, and Eddie's brother was playing in the Marion County tournament. So I know you guys could not be there, but incredible time. Drinks were flowing, bets were had, and shout out to the Cook family. 6 of us came together and we pulled our funds and we hit the Derby trifecta. So it was a great time.
So the Derby trifecta means that you picked successfully the top 3 finishing horses.
Correct. We did.
In order?
Yes. Well, we boxed them. So we just threw the numbers out. They can finish in any order with the trifecta box.
How many different combinations did you have?
We had, so there were 6 of us. So it was 6 horses in total. So it was a $1 try, cost us $60. Paid out, I think, $1,100. We split it 6 ways.
Okay, so
the different combinations.
What I'm getting at is so pardon my ignorance here. So the 3 horses that won, you had picked those 3 as the winning combo, right? You submitted or wagered on how many different combinations?
So that's going to require me to once again show my lack of intelligence here in terms of my inability to do basic math. I apologize for that. All you have to do is press the box button and then pick your horses, and it will put out the combinations for you. You don't have to manually do it all those times.
When you say box, you mean what?
Okay, so a straight trifecta is exactly in order. A box in betting terms is picking any 3 horses, and it does not matter where they finish first, second, or third, as long as they cross.
What I'm saying to you is...
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, but what I'm saying to you is you had wagered on how many boxes?
Couldn't tell you. We picked 6 horses. You do the math for me. I don't know. 18? Is that? I think I'm off on that. I don't know how many different permutations that would have been.
I get you. So you picked 6 horses, and then so long as any combination of those 6 finishes in the
top 3, you win.
Well, that seems like a given. That seems like it'd be easy,
you got 22 horses to pick from, so it's a little harder than that. And a normal day, yes, that'd be probably pretty easy if it's a 7-horse field, but a 20-horse field, it's tough.
So you walked away then yourself with, you said $1,100 divided by 6, right?
Roughly, yes. So it turned out about to $180 per person, give or take.
Gotta like that, right?
Yeah, it's very nice. And it was also
dinner's on you.
It was, and additionally, it was one of the closest Derby finishes in history. First 3-horse finish in like 90 years. So
here is my one nitpick, and I always wonder if there has to be a reason for this, but you guys tell me if you notice this. I'd like to know if anybody besides me noticed this. Does it drive anybody else crazy? Sometimes I wonder. So I was in a restaurant watching it, right? I do love the Derby, and I like to watch it. I always just pick 3 horses based on the names. I know nothing else about it. I did have Mystic Dan as a place. And that was the winner, obviously. But here is my question. Did anybody else feel this way? And I'm going to use esoteric television terms. In television, you have what's called the clean feed. That's the feed that comes down without any graphics on it. Okay? For the majority of the race, like, where are the graphics telling you who's lead? Like, they wait until, like, turn 3 before they start showing you the running order. And then at the end, they didn't show, like, I'm watching it on NBC, and I'm like, okay, like I know that like that horse number whatever apparently is the one that's in the running for the win here. I'm in a restaurant, so I can't hear it.
Sure.
But I'm not. But they're not showing immediately the immediate rundown.
So
did anybody else notice this?
Commonplace in horse racing, and I would be purely guessing on this. I'm sure my dad told me about this. My brother's listening today, so I will have to give him a jab here. I'm sure I will get a text of my ignorance publicly on the airwaves, but generally, if you went to Churchill Downs on a Tuesday and you bet the 6th horse in the 6, right? And that same event plays out. It's a mile around the track.
Right.
When they come down the stretch, about halfway to go until the pole, they pull the electronic results off the board, meaning they pull what you're talking about, who's running in what order. My guess would be, just in case that electronic pad is off and it comes down to a photo finish, is why they pull them. But that's not just commonplace to the Derby. That's
But usually, like, even afterwards, they never said, like, unofficial results or tentative results. Like, it was just, literally, it was like.
So usually they do, but because of how tight it was, they did not this past
They didn't
go.
last year either, though, because I had the same. I remember last year saying the same thing. I'm like, where is the run? Like, it used to be, like, if you go back and you watch old ones from the get-go, they're showing, like, with either a line over the horse or just the running order up the top the entire time. And this time it was like, I mean, granted, you have and those guys are unbelievable. I mean, the narration to tell you is fabulous. But, and the other thing, too, I always feel sorry for the horse that, like, is into turn 1, is in the lead. And he's excited, and everybody's excited for him. And he's like, look, I feel that you're whipping me, but, like, we're doing good here. I mean, and then he kind of fades, and before you know it, and then there's always some poor fellow, like Secretary did this, just hangs out in the back, and then by about, coming off of 2, is like, throws away the cigarette butt.
I guess it's time to go. Let's get going.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
It was fun, though, right?
It was a good time. It was a great finish, great weekend overall, and now we turn to the greatest spectacle in racing as our countdown rolls through with the Grand Prix next week, and then ultimately quals, carb day, the whole nine until the Sorry, I got my weeks mixed up. This weekend, and then, of course, the 500th at the end of the month. So,
Eddie, you said your brother was in a baseball tournament?
That's right. I didn't say that, but Jimmy shared the cards there. Yeah.
Well, was that the excuse you used, or did he really play?
No, he really did play.
And how did he do?
They did fine. They won both of their games on Saturday, and they won on Friday night, so they are in the Marion County Championship game. It is scheduled for tomorrow night at 8 at Victory Field, but weather not looking like it's going to help them at all. Looks like it'll be delayed probably, which is not good for the Decatur Central Hawks, but nonetheless, they're still getting the opportunity to play at Victory Field, which
That's
is always
awesome.
cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Have either one of you guys ever heard of a wives' tale about mustard and cramps?
No.
Eddie, have you ever heard that?
You brought this up last week.
A home remedy about mustard, yellow mustard, and leg cramps.
You brought this up last week, and I scoffed at you because mustard is absolutely disgusting.
Okay, fair.
Now, are you bringing this up because you tried out this wives' tale and the mini over the weekend?
So, I had always heard that yellow mustard is good for to be preventative about leg cramps, or in the event that a leg cramp is starting, that a quick burst of yellow mustard will. Why do you keep looking at your watch? Everything going okay?
We'll make him a part of the show again. Brother Bob writes in, yes, it does work, Jake. There you go.
Thank you.
So
See,
you have
I'm
validation.
glad that you were looking at it.
Yep.
So I had always heard that. I've never experimented with it. Pickle juice is also supposed to be good.
I've heard that. I have heard that one.
So I had mentioned that last week I got a Charlie horse in the middle of and I mean, you get a Charlie horse how often?
I don't know, like once every couple months or so, maybe.
Yeah, and usually like at night or like in the morning, right? All of a sudden, and it's the absolute worst. And then when you get one, your leg is sore, your muscle is sore for like 3 days afterwards, right? So I had received a Charlie horse in my calf last week, leading up to probably on Wednesday, and the mini's on Saturday. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like you got to be kidding me. So we went on Friday night. We went to go at the Tarkington Theater in Carmel. We went and saw Anastasia. Shannon's coworker's son, Matt Sumter, he's in the play itself. He was great. The play was fabulous. If you've not seen Anastasia, it's very well done in Carmel. So we went to that, and then on the way home, I stopped because I knew the mini was the next morning at the grocery store and went into the little deli area and grabbed 5 mustard packets. Okay?
Is that you being economical? You didn't want to go get the whole bottle?
No. Well, I'm not going to run with carrying the whole bottle.
Oh, okay. My
for the
bad.
mini,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So,
though that would have been a sight to see.
No doubt. So I put them in my pocket.
Sure.
And everyone is like, there's no way. Like, Mottman says to me, no, this does not work. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it works. I read it on the internet, right?
So
I
it
know
must
it
be
works.
true, yeah.
Sure enough, on White River Parkway, just before New York Street, so like mile 11 and a half, all of a sudden I feel it. You can start to feel it, right?
Sure.
My left hamstring, I'm like, okay, I'm about to cramp. Like, I got to pull over here. Like, I can hear the air leaving the tires. So I pull over by the water station. I get 2 of the mustard packets and rip those bad boys open, and then just like you do with one of the gels, dry mouth and all, but I had the water at the water station, right? I took 2 of those packets, sucked down the mustard, shot it with water, and I'm like, let's go.
I can't confirm he did show me the video.
It was videotaped. That's correct, because we were thinking vomiting might have been a possibility, but it did not happen. And I will tell you, it worked. Your brother is correct. It absolutely worked. Now, maybe it had nothing to do with that, but I think it did. It absolutely worked. So
Hey, it got you across the finish line. I'm not
got
going to
across
argue
the finish line, and mini number, I thought it was 15. I went back and looked. I think it's 14. Mini number 14 is complete.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Dr.
Colts
Mottman
getting
enjoyed
set
it again,
for-
too, by the way.
He did. I told him, I go, listen, I hope I'm not like slowing you down here with the pace. And he said, if it weren't, if you didn't ask me, I wouldn't be doing it anyway. So we got it done. 4th year in a row that he's done it with me.
Nice.
So Colts rookie minicamp coming up on Friday. Listen, the NFL is the master at keeping things there's always something, right? This one is a little bit intriguing, right? Because players are there even before they sign, correct?
Yes. Right? It's because it's mandatory minicamp. So, yes, even if you're not on there, I think you're still supposed to report.
And so I think there's some intrigue. I do think that, and we talked a lot about this coming off of the draft, but, Jimmy, I think it's an intriguing draft class, not only because of the fact that they went. The reason it's intriguing to me is because you have a guy coming in to report that I think everybody knows probably was not the one going into it that they targeted as their draft pick, but he fell under the guise of his skill set was such, and he was such a can't miss for them that they went probably away from what originally was their design intent because they didn't think he'd be there. And so now maybe that puts a little more pressure on him,
I mean, there was going to be inherent pressure applied to whoever that selection was, assuming it was a defensive player, because the way the board fell for the Colts, Chris Ballard was going to have his pick of the entire draft crop of defensive players, and he was either going to have the opportunity to draft one of, or maybe in his mind, the best cornerback in this class, or one of, or in his mind, the best edge rusher in this class in Leatu Latu. So if that winds up panning out the way they think it's going to be, everybody's seen what he did in college, everybody knows that he has, the stats and the data to back it up, that he very well might be able to contribute right out of the gate. He's an intriguing aspect of this. It's the 2nd year in a row because of where he was selected, even though the circumstances and the projections of the pick were different. 2nd year in a row, rookie minicamp has a little bit of buzz. Last year, of course, being Anthony Richardson's de facto rookie year. And then a lot of eyes are going to be on Adonai Mitchell and see the wide receiver that he's able to develop and become. Because we mentioned it, yes, it would have been great. I still think they should have done a little more this offseason to help with the arsenal of weapons around Anthony Richardson. But if he's able to produce, you can find value in a deep wide receiver class. You can always find value in the 2nd round. Eyes are going to be on him starting with rookie minicamp of how does Mitchell develop? How does he progress? Is it, in fact, him taking Alec Pierce's job going into week 1? And then how does everything mesh around Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and him? And that's not even getting to some of the other selections that the Colts will have featured starting on Friday at rookie minicamp. But yes, the NFL is a mastermind at making things that might seem vague or might seem like small potatoes matter and turn into big entrees on the calendar year. That said, it rings more true when you're the Colts in this still vague window of your quarterback's basically a rookie, but also you have pieces around him that, yes, are going to be rookies on their draft card status going into this year, but that you're hoping can make big impacts right out of the gate.
Does it bother you that everybody in the country has picked the Knicks?
No, not really. I mean, I get it. Like, I understand perhaps why those selections are made. I'm going to take the Pacers. I think that the Pacers can win this thing in 6 games. But, no, I mean, if you were a casual fan, just a casual fan of basketball, or if you're an expert watching it, either way, you look at these two teams, the sex appeal of the NBA offensive game lies in guard play, and Jalen Brunson has it. Like, I get it. I understand why that attraction is there. The Pacers have it in a lot of different ways. Halliburton can turn it on certain, but Siakam down low and his ability as well expanding outside, that isn't as sexy to some as Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby and others.
New York has something that Indiana does not. But Indiana has a few things that New York does not. We'll get into that in just a bit. But Mike Chappell from CBS 4 WXIN Fox 59 joining us next. Colts rookie minicamp upcoming storylines with Chap next.
My mom's the bomb. Her hugs are
You know, I have to admit this, and then I'm done with it. I promise, Jimmy, I'm done with it. As I'm running around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on Saturday, and I'm looking at just the 2.5 miles of aluminum, and I'm like, man, this place is, it's massive, right? And all I can think to myself is, you put somebody in every one of these seats and in every inch of this grass in the interior, and you get 40% the attendance that was in a plaza area for the NFL draft. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, right?
It's crazy how
Madonna just gave a concert in Brazil that was in an area the same size as like on a plaza that was very similar in appearance to the area where the draft was, and 2.5 million people for that, they said.
Nearly 157,000 people were at Churchill Downs for the Derby.
Exactly. Think about that. The Derby, that was 20% the attendance that was there when the 5th round was going on. Unbelievable. Mike Chappell joins us now from CBS 4 and Fox 59. And the end of the week, the Colts will be in the news because it is rookie minicamp. I guess, Chap, I will begin with this in terms of rookie minicamp for our listeners. Take me through kind of what happens and the commitment that is required. Is this mandatory? Is it voluntary? What happens and for how long?
Yeah, I think it's 2 days, Friday, Saturday. It used to be 3, and I think they get their work done. It's sort of getting guys in here and letting them see what their – I don't want to say an orientation. It's a lot bigger than that. But it just sort of says, okay, here's your work environment. Here's your rookie teammates. There'll be a bunch of tryout guys. I don't think they've got – Joel Erickson's worked his butt off to get the list of players. There's only, if I'm not mistaken, 5 or 6 or 7 undrafted free agents they've signed because this roster is already pretty full, although you can always find room for players at the bottom of the roster, at the bottom of the 90, certainly. But it gets them in here. We'll get a chance to look at the draft picks. We've already talked to the draft picks. We get them, on Zoom after the draft. But this is a chance to be there with them and watch them. We can watch practice. It's about an hour for what it is. Non-contact. It's they're out there running around and throwing, but there's no contact. It's just a chance for them to get here and get comfortable. And most of the time, everyone's here. Contractor, I expect the Colts to sign, but they got 9 draft picks. I expect them to sign 5 out of 6 of them this week. They could do them all, I suppose. They got most of them done last year before minicamp. Anthony Richardson was 2 or 3 of the guys, including him, was right before training camp. Generally signed. If you're not signed, you sign some kind of waiver protection. Although, again, there's not a lot you can do to hurt yourself running around and throwing, but you still do that to protect yourself. So that's pretty much what it is. It's important to the team. It's important to the rookies. We get a chance to justify why we're covering the team, but it's just the next step of the process. And they'll have, there'll always be 1 or 2 good storylines. One year is really kind of funny. One year, God, they run together 6, 7, 8 years ago. We had Ken Griffey Jr.'s son was here, Trey Griffey. I think he came in as a tryout player, and we all did the story, and then he's gone the next day because he wasn't up to stuff. There's always a player or two. There'll be some guys from local schools, Marion probably, I don't know, or local high schools. So it's really a good time. But it's more team rookie than it is for media. It's just the next step.
2017, by the way, Trey Griffey, a wide receiver out of Arizona, was signed on May 14th, and he was cut on June 12th. So Chap's feature was June 11th of 2017, probably, right?
See, when you cover the team all the time, there's the 7 or 8 of us, 6 that do it. After a while, you realize that if there's a good storyline like that, a local guy or a name, do it right away. Don't save a Ball State or an Indiana State kid for a week because you got to, no, because you may save it. There have been a few times I got to admit, like in training camp, and you got a good local story, and you think, well, I'm going to say that till the end of the week, and then the guy's gone. Then it's done. You can't use it. So if you get the local angle, and certainly if it's a tryout, if it's an undrafted guy, he's probably got more of a chance at the undrafted guy because they keep undrafted guys. But you got to understand that the local angle generally is a guy you better get done, or he'll be gone before you have a chance to do what would be a great story, and you just hit the delete button, it's gone.
Hey, Mike, my apologies if you mentioned this right off the top there, but I am curious of this. Is this a camp, even though it's for, the undrafted free agents and the rookies and whatever else, can veterans show up if they so choose just to be able to go through the motions and help out some of the younger guys, or do they stay basically away from it?
No, well, first of all, they get, this is weekend for them, so they've already gone through their week. The only veterans are the younger guys who maybe a quarterback. Sam Ellinger won't be there, I don't believe, but there have been a handful of guys that it's 1 and 2 year guys who do it. Most of the veterans, again, they do their work Monday through Thursday, and then they're adios. So there might be a player or two to say, yeah, I remember that guy from last year by name recognition. But by and large, you need to have X number of players just so you can run practice. If you only sign a handful of undrafted guys, then you need a boatload of tryouts, or again, the first or second year guys who were on the roster and didn't play much last year. So there'll probably be, I don't know, this is like guessing weight at the state fair. There'll be 40 or 50 guys out there because you need X number of players to practice.
Chap, I realize you're kind of guessing here. The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox 59 and CBS 4 is our guest, but you mentioned second-year players that it could be valuable for them, especially when working with some of the pieces that were selected either via the draft or brought in via undrafted free agency. Let's use Adonai Mitchell for a second alongside Anthony Richardson. What's more beneficial for that relationship? Richardson maybe making a surprise appearance at rookie minicamp, or Adonai Mitchell putting in extra work working with Anthony Richardson in some other fashion?
I don't think we'll see Richardson there. I don't. He's one of those guys. No, he's one of those guys that they signed 2 undrafted rookie free agents that, again, Joel has it to I think it's Jason, is it Bean from Kansas? And keep in mind, Chris Ballard's got intimate knowledge of Kansas because that's where his son Cole goes. And then a guy that has been around, had surgery, went to USC, and his name escapes me because I'm not in weekend mode yet. But this isn't for Richardson to get more time with these guys. That'll come. But it's important for AD to get out there just to see what's going on and sort of, again, all of a sudden, you were drafted and I'm a pro now, but now you're in the building, and this is, this is where your meeting room is. This is where the weight room is. This is where the locker room is. This is where the cafeteria is. So there is orientation to go through as far as knowing your way around it. But Richardson's time is Monday through Thursday. That's when we saw a video that the Colts put out there, and every video you see of AR throwing is encouraging. And what they put out there last week, I thought he was zipping it pretty good. I'm going to write about him later today, and the other players just talk about the presence of having him out there. And sometimes that's overused, but when this is your guy, this is the guy that I know the personnel guys and Chris Ballard hates it, but if you don't hit on this guy, if he's not the right guy, then you're screwed. You just are. He's got to be the guy for the next, 4, 6, 8 years. And every time he practices is going to be meaningful. Him getting back out there is meaningful. I haven't looked at it yet, but he and Jonathan Taylor, they were on the field for 2 plays in a game. They couldn't have practiced more than, half a dozen times, and that's probably liberal because remember the first part of the season when Richardson was playing, Taylor wasn't. He had that first month was sort of, not. So that's the big thing. And with AR, he threw with the receivers last year, so he did have off season. I think during the real off season, after OTAs, they got together somewhere, whether it was Florida, whatever, with Pittman and all those guys. So that was valuable. But every snap that the young quarterback gets is going to be huge. And again, you got, like I say, you got Mitchell, you got the other draft pick, Anthony Gold, and Ashton Doolin, who's coming back. So they've got, and again, when you're pinning so much of your season success on, they always talk explosive and all this. They're talking about the quarterback Richardson and Taylor. They really expect and believe that those two players are going to elevate everyone. And from what we saw, again, really, really small snapshot with Richardson because of the injuries. And with Taylor, 2021 was really, really above board. I mean, when you have a better season than Edgerrin James ever had in 2021, and I would argue that was the best season by a Colts running back ever. And he broke the franchise record, and people said, yeah, but it was a 17-game season. No, he broke it in 16 games. So they really believe that the addition of those two guys for whatever, 15, 16 games, whatever, and then Michael Pittman, that's gonna lift everybody. But at the same time, you need the Mitchell to contribute in some form or fashion, and Gould, whether it's on offense or special teams. So this is where it starts for those young guys is this weekend.
Well, Chap, you mentioned it there in your answer, but I guess what I was getting at was what we've heard nationally from bigger name quarterbacks, the Josh Allens, the Joe Burrows, the Patrick Mahomes, and you mentioned that last year at Florida, off-site, Anthony Richardson did the same thing, getting together with your receiving crew and getting extra reps in somewhere else just to further familiarize yourself going into the season. That's not something just rookie quarterbacks do. A lot of veteran quarterbacks do it to kind of get a jump start on their communication, their timing, everything else with wide receivers. Will we see anything like that or hear anything like that from Richardson this go-round, or because he is in still rehab mode, will we see most of that just happen inside Colts facilities?
Well, that's a good question, and until we know where Richardson is, we'll get him the first week of OTAs, which is either next week or the week after. I haven't checked the schedule that close, but he's going to be monitored, limited, whatever you want to call it. Now, when you get past OTAs, I would think in June he would be to the point that he can expand things, and maybe in the middle of June or early July he can be sort of freer to get together, but. They're going to make sure that they keep reins on this guy because he's like any of these athletes, and he would go overboard. He would throw as much as he could, as hard as he could, and that's not what you want. He doesn't need to be ready in June. He needs to be ready in July when camp opens. And to take it a step further, he needs to really be ready in September. But again, from everything we've seen and talking to the coaches, that he is at least ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. So, but yeah, I won't be surprised if we see something in the off season with these guys getting together back in Florida or wherever, just because that's what they do. And we shouldn't be surprised if that happens. Like you said, most quarterbacks and guys get together not for 2 weeks or whatever, but maybe 3 or 4 days. And it not only is important for what they do in the field, which is really important, but it gives these guys time when you're done throwing, then you kick back and, go to a movie or you just hang out at a house and have dinner and spend time together, because that's how I just go back to all the times with, back in the days with Peyton and Marvin and Reggie. And there were times that Peyton and Marvin were just on the same page. I've talked to Peyton where, they're in a game against somebody, and he just looks over at Marvin at the line of scrimmage, and he says Buffalo, and that was their way of saying, hey, when we played Buffalo 3 weeks ago or 2 years ago, you ran this route, do it again. And that's how you get that connectivity, by being around and practice and understanding each other, to where a hand gesture or a nod or a word, and both of you know what it means. So these guys are nowhere near that, obviously, but this is how it begins. It didn't connect right away with Manning and Harrison either. It's something you work on, And you work on it by, dumb as it sounds, by working on it, by putting in the time. And at some point, you hope these guys get to that somewhere near that level. They'll never reach where Manning and Harrison and Wayne were. They just won't. But to get somewhere, make that your goal. And if you fall short, you're still much ahead of the game.
Chap, lastly, this time of year in May, you've covered sports in this market for a long time, obviously, and I know that the Colts have been your beat, but you've been, around the department itself. You get more nostalgic this time of year in May. It feels more fitting in Indianapolis right now because of A, the month of May in the Indy 500, or B, the Pacers and the Knicks squaring off in the playoffs.
Probably the 500 because, Jake, this is we're telling stories among friends, but with these wish programs where somebody wishes for something, everyone who's a big race fan should wish to spend 3 days in the media room with Robin Miller.
Oh my gosh!
It's just I'm telling you, it's golden. And the entertainment and the long donuts and people stopping by, it was much better when we had that small media room back, near the garage or whatever. But just the track, and I used to go out there a lot because I was the ace guy that went out there, and I didn't know. All I knew is, turning left is good, turning right's bad.
Yeah.
And I could do stuff off of that, but just the experience. And I always used to go to the first turn for the start of the race, and the flyover is unbelievable. I don't care if it's the wing or if it's attack helicopters, but that's the great thing. And I just Indy is the 500. And I always thought about a goal would be to own property, a house in Speedway. How many cars could I get on my lawn at $30 or $40 a pop? It'd be amazing how many cars you can squeeze on your property, and realizing you're going to tear the hell out of your property. But it's just a great time, and it's still the month of May, and it's still the 500. It always will be.
Man, I'll tell you what, Chap, for people that didn't know or understand the connection that Robin Miller had, or the trust that he had for those that he covered, all you had to do was sit in that media center, and it was like Bobby Unser walks upstairs, and he's walking past Roger Penske to go talk to Robin Miller. You know what I mean? It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
How contentious it got at times between Robin and AJ Foyt.
That's the best.
And they worked through it, and Robin can call these guys at the drop of a hat.
I know.
It's amazing. And are we 2 years removed from Robin? It's not 3, it's 2. I lose track of time.
I think that's right.
But it's just,
Is this the second or I'll have to think if this is the second or third race, but yeah.
I think it's a second, but again, some of us were able to work with him and call him friends and know his warts and all. Warts and all. But I always have flashbacks to time. I was thinking of times on the road with the Colts and some of the stupid-ass things we did with Robin because it was Robin. Walking down the damn Jersey Turnpike because our taxi blew up and getting in some guy's, car with a guard dog. I'm thinking, are we stupid?
Yeah, and Robin probably stayed friends with the guy for 20 years after that, right? Son, I got to tell you. Yeah.
I thought we were going to die.
August of 21, by the way, is when Robin did pass away. August of 2021 is when Robin Miller.
This third year then.
Yeah.
But he's just in the way that the track honored him and all that. So, every time May rolls around, it's just, I think of that. And he was a treasure, a flawed treasure, yes. But I miss him. And but again, May is whatever else goes on. And the Pacers-Knicks is going to be great. It's amazing to me how, as much as I watch ESPN, the Pacers are just an afterthought. They're just, it's like, oh, yeah, they're in it too.
Well, Mike Greenberg's going to join us in like 10 minutes. We're going to take it up with him. That's the bone that we're going to pick, right?
Some of us are damn tired that it's like, oh, yeah, and the Knicks play the Pacers. No, it's like the that's why you just hope that they just shove it up the Knicks' rear ends just so the national would pay notice.
Chap,
tell him I said that, okay?
Next week, we're gonna get a recap for you on what Greenberg said about Mike Chappell saying the Knicks need to have it shoved up the rear end, and we'll talk to you about it then. I appreciate it.
There we go.
All right, Mike Chappell joining us from CBS 4 and WXAN Fox 59. That conversation with Greenberg, by the way, coming up just about 10 minutes from now.
JMV from Moyer Fine Jewelers.
You hear him on this radio station as part of Greeny, obviously, Mike Greenberg from 10 until 12. You also see him on Get Up on ESPN, and Mike Greenberg is going to join us next.
Spring in Indy, and if you hate...
Up to the guest. New York, New York. You're playing in Indianapolis when Pacers-Knicks are getting set to get underway, right?
Yes, sir.
Joining us now on the program on the always busy and surprisingly unsponsored guest line. You hear him, of course, from 10 until 12 every day on this radio station on Greeny. You also see him on Get Up on ESPN. Mike Greenberg of ESPN Radio joining us. Mike, I appreciate the time, and my goal over the next couple of minutes is to get you to become the first ESPN personality to predict the Pacers in 6. Can we get that done?
I don't know if I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you. I think the series has the potential to be fascinating and fabulous. That isn't what I expect. But I will say I wouldn't be as surprised. I was quite surprised that the odds when they opened were what they were, as significantly favored toward the Knicks. And in fact, for it to be a shorter series, the ESPN Bet app, I believe, has the likeliest outcome of this series, Knicks in 5. I don't see that at all. I think tonight the tone will be set. I think Indiana's style will hurt the Knicks. The Knicks are incredibly shallow right now as far as their bench. Everybody is hurt. They're playing 7 guys. I still favor the Knicks, but only minimally in the series.
To me, Mike, and this is what's fascinating about this series, Indiana clearly has more depth in terms of players that are contributing and can stay fresh. But New York has, and a handful of teams have this, New York has a guy that I call a get-the-hell-out-of-the-way guy, and I don't think Indiana does. I mean, I think when the game's on the line, Brunson is the kind of guy that come hell or high water, he is going to get that bucket. And I love Tyrese Halliburton, but he is not that guy yet, and Siakam has to be in specific operating areas. Do you agree with that assessment?
Probably, but I think that assumes that this comes down – that applies to me in the games – where it comes down to 4 minutes and it's tied. And the Knicks just finished a series where that was the case in all 6 of their games against the Sixers, and that led to the heroics from Maxey and Brunson late. Games don't have to come down to that. Games can easily come down to me, the biggest difference in this series is the stylistic one. And because I love the history of it so much, I mean, Knicks Pacers to me will always be the Davis brothers on one side, and Oakley and Mason on the other side, and Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing, and Larry Brown and Pat Riley, and those series in the 90s where both teams wanted to win the game 88-84. Now, the Pacers want to score in the 120s and the 130s. The Knicks still want to beat you 97-93. So who can dictate their style to the other? I think that, to me, is the most important factor in all of this, which is to say if the Pacers are able to not get – to me, the Pacers are going to have to defensive rebound because you can't run the break. You can't run fast. You can't play fast if you can't take care of your defensive boards. If the Pacers are able to do that and get the game played at some degree in their tempo, then I don't know if it matters if the Knicks have Jalen Brunson or Patrick Ewing or anybody else. That's not a style that is going to be suited well to the Knicks. So that may be a coaching thing more than anything. That may be Rick Carlisle against Tom Thibodeau. But one way or another, if the Pacers can get this game played at their pace, no pun intended, then I think that may be more important than anything Jalen Brunson can do.
ESPN's Mike Greenberg is our guest. Mike, you bring up the history aspect of it. For a lot of Knicks fans my age, which is very late 20s, early 30s, there hasn't been a level of playoff success remotely close to what those Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Pat Riley teams were when this series was at its apex. The Pacers, it would be the same if not for those 2 conference final appearances in the Paul George era against the Miami Heat. So from the younger Knicks fans' perspective that does not know what it was like during those golden days when it was Hicks versus Knicks, what do you tell them, and what is the atmosphere from that demographic going into a series like this that carries so much history?
Well, it's worth quickly pointing out that these teams also met when you're talking about the Paul George runs. They beat the Knicks one of those years in a second-round series. I can still see Roy Hibbert blocking Carmelo Anthony going to the basket in that Game 6 that Indiana won at home. The rivalry between the Knicks and the Pacers in the 90s was as good as basketball has ever been in my lifetime. So I'm not old enough to have watched Russell play against Wilt. people will point to Magic and Larry. They played each other in the finals, I want to say 3 times. And that's probably those are probably the 2 most famous rivalries in basketball history. As far as gritty, hating each other, drama like you wouldn't believe, incredibly close, evenly matched series, the Knicks and Pacers, I want to say, played each other 5 times in a 7-year period in the playoffs. I'm doing that from memory, but certainly in 94,
93,
95,
4, 5, 8, 9, and 2000. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
So
yeah.
Every year, and every single one of them was decided by a play here or a play there. And some of the moments are some of the most famous moments ever. The Knick fan will point to Larry Johnson's 4-point play. The Pacer fan will point to Reggie Miller's final 8.9 seconds and the choke sign that he gave to Spike Lee and many others. Generally speaking, the Pacers had the better of it then. Both of them were sort of punching up at Michael's Bulls through that entire period. And then late in the 90s, the Heat came along when Pat Riley wound up there and sort of rounded out what was a big 4 in the Eastern Conference. But the East, for the majority of the 90s, was dominated by 3 big teams. Michael's Bulls, and generally speaking, they always won. And then the Pacers and Knicks, who were vying to be the ones who could get there when they didn't. And the Knicks beat the Pacers, and that Ewing had that huge Game 7, and they went to the final in 94 and lost in 7. And then the Pacers came back and beat them in 95, wound up losing to Orlando. But that actually turned out to be the last game and series that Pat Riley was with the Knicks. He then went to Miami. So there is so much incredibly significant history between these teams. And I was saying, I want them all in the building. I want to see everybody today. I haven't looked this up. Is Reggie doing the game tonight on TNT?
I believe he is doing the TNT broadcast. Is he not, Eddie?
So that would make sense. So he'll be there. I want Ewing in the building. I want all those guys from those series in the building, as many of them are still around. And Anthony Mason is no longer with us. But those series, that was basketball at its best. Let's put it this way. They called a technical foul Saturday night, not to change the subject. For those who watched Anthony Edwards and his brilliant performance Saturday night when Minnesota beat Denver, they called a technical foul on Anthony Edwards for glaring too long at someone. There's not one player on the floor in the Knick Pacers series in the 90s who would have finished a game. I mean, not a single game.
Right. Can you imagine, Mike, can you imagine the choke sign today, right? The choke sign today would be like ejection, right?
And of course, it's one of the greatest memories that fans of either side candidly have. Because what we want is drama, and that can come in a lot of different ways. It can come in some of the artistic beauty that we get sometimes from the Warriors, in their heyday with, Steph and Clay and them. And it can just come from the grit and good old-fashioned honest dislike that frequently, in fact, that probably has been the best part of most sports history, has been that. And the Knicks and Pacers in the 90s personified that as much as anybody ever has.
Mike Greenberg is our guest. By the way, Reggie Miller on the call for Game 2 is my understanding. Not Game 1, but Game 2 on TNT.
Tonight.
But, Mike, I wanted to go back to what you mentioned because, that 94, you and I are of the same era, right? So we're on 2 different spectrums in those 90s, obviously, of the passionate interest level and the spectrum by which we're watching those series. But the 2 things that Knicks fans and Pacers fans both knew and maybe wanted to, not recognize but knew in 94 and 95 was there's your window because Jordan's hitting curveballs, right? And so it's like everybody forgot Olajuwon was still playing. But the 98 series, to me, where the Pacers win in 5, and then they go to Chicago and they take on the Swan Song era, Tony Kukoc, Pippen, Jordan, Bulls. It is my opinion, and I want yours because you covered those Bulls teams. That 98 Pacers team, even though they went to the finals in 2000 and had the glory years with Reggie in the early years of the Pacers-Knicks rivalry, that 98 team to me was the best Pacers NBA team that they've had. And that was the best team to match up against Chicago and the closest of anybody that could rival what Chicago during their dynasty was able to put on the floor. You agree or disagree?
I do agree. You would know better than I would if they were better than the team that went to the final I remember that game like it was yesterday, Game 7 of that series in '98. The Pacers had the lead most of the second half.
Yeah, and then
they were ahead most of that game.
Correct. Scottie Pippen fouled Mark Jackson 37 times in the fourth quarter of that game.
There's no call. Yeah,
that's right.
So I worked with Jalen for 15 years, and so we've had a million conversations about that series, about how close they were to beating Jordan. Look, I mean, just the numbers themselves. Jordan's teams never went to 7 games in the finals. So immediately, no one in the NBA Finals played them as close as that. They went 7 games in the East Final with the Knicks in '93, and I'm struggling to remember anybody else taking them 7 games. So right there, the numbers 100% suggest that was the closest that anybody came to beating Jordan during that entire run. They lost to Orlando when he came back and played 17 games wearing number 45. But in the 6 championship seasons, if I'm doing this from memory, I'm probably forgetting one. I don't remember any other 7-game series.
I think that's correct.
The '93 series against the Knicks, which the Knicks went ahead 2-0. That was the John Starks dunk game in Game 2, and then the Bulls won 3 and 4 at home, and then there was the Charles Smith game was Game 5, and then the Bulls won it. Oh, no, that only went 6. I take it back. They won that in 6 because the Knicks had home court advantage. So Indiana, that might have been the only 7-game series that they wound up playing. I'm sure there's something along the way I'm forgetting, but that was a very long answer to a short question. Yes, I agree with you. That was the closest anybody came to beating Jordan in the 6 years that he wound up winning the championship.
What is the Mike Greenberg, our guest, in terms of the I always ask this to people outside of market because I think, Mike, we live in a snow globe, right? I mean, we live in an echo chamber in any variation of life. Oftentimes we can get caught up in that. And I'm always curious of what the outside market perspective is of the Pacers. Is this a team that is seen as a young, on-the-rise team, or is it one that is seen as, yeah, okay, I mean, they won a series against a depleted Milwaukee team, and they're as anonymous and as obscure as others that are still around in the league?
Well, I mean, I think the in-season tournament helped a little bit for well, I mean, the hardcore basketball fans know the answers to the question. As far as what I think you're asking me, which is what is sort of the conventional wisdom, I'll give you 2 examples. One, I thought Halliburton, it was really a coming out party for him in the in-season tournament. I think people paid a lot of attention. But the answer to your question really would be this. The conventional wisdom, and I can even tell you that the Knicks fans at the Garden the last day of the regular season were begging the Knicks to lose so they would get Indiana in round 1 instead of having to play Philly. I think the conventional wisdom was whoever is the 2 seed is going to wind up getting the Sixers, and that's worse. Everyone wanted to be 3 to play against Indiana. That obviously didn't work out for Milwaukee. I'm one who thought that the Pacers were going to win that series anyway. Even if Giannis and Lillard had played, we'll never know. But I would say the conventional wisdom is because of the first point you made, which is the Pacers don't have a true superstar, like someone who crosses over, like they did when they had Paul George at his apex, or certainly when they had Reggie and those guys. And they haven't had any like a deep playoff run in particularly recent memory that has put these guys into the spotlight. So I would say for the most part, most basketball fans don't know them that well, and that might be part of the reason why the Knicks are such a significant favorite. But this is their opportunity to change that completely. I was a big fan of Benedict Mathurin, by the way, and I know he's not a part of this now, but I feel like they've got they've got a couple of young players with unusual names that no one knows anything about who in the long run have a chance to wind up being very good players. This is an excellent chance in a spotlight series against the biggest market team of them all to show everybody you showed up to watch the Knicks, but we're going to show you we are actually the better and more exciting team to watch. I mean, for basketball fans who, and I don't need to tell you or anyone listening to this conversation this, but a lot of basketball fans want to see games in the 120s, and that's obviously where the Pacers always play them.
By the way, for the sake of housekeeping, you were right the first go-round, Mike, in the first back-to-back for the Bulls, and they beat the Trailblazers on that path. They beat the Knicks in 7 in 91-92. the only other team to take Jordan to 7 at all.
That was the year before.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the year before I'm talking about. That's exactly right. That was when the Knicks were kind of young upstarts, and the Knicks won Game 1 on the road of that series and put the Bulls in a situation where they were losing, where no one gave the Knicks a chance. And that was Riley. I want to say that was Riley's first year with the Knicks, and that's exactly right. So I was right, but I was also wrong because I was thinking of the wrong year. It was 97. It was 7 games was the previous year, and then the series I was thinking about where the Knicks had home court advantage was a 6-game series.
When you look at Tyrese Halliburton and the takeoff platform he had during the in-season tournament and where he has been post-injury and now kind of rounding back into form, what do you see out of the young Pacers guard?
I love him. I mean, I think everybody loves him. I don't know why he doesn't have a chance to become one of the better players. Well, I don't know exactly how you put this. I wouldn't trade, Anthony Edwards or Luka for him, but I think he has a chance to be one of the, spotlight players in the NBA going forward. I mean, you guys see him, day in, day out, infinitely more than I do. But, I hosted the NBA shows the last couple of years, so I watched I watched as many games as I possibly could. And I think he's terrific. I love the way he leads that. He seems like the perfect player for that offense. He seems to be constantly throwing 30-foot passes up the floor to guys who are, racing out in front of the pack. He's a good scorer. I don't know that he's, and again, you guys tell me because you see him every single day. I don't know that he's the dynamic scorer that some of the other young stars in the NBA are, but he looks to me like a player who could be a signature player, maybe one of the 2 top players. See, the way I used to define greatness in the NBA, when I say used to, I mean up until about 3 weeks ago, was you needed to have 3 top-level players to be a championship contender. It's now become 2. I think you need 2. I think the days of the big 3, and we saw what happened in Phoenix, those are over. You need 2 A-level players and then a bunch of other really good ones. I think Halliburton is going to be good enough to be one of those 2, and you just need to get another one. And then you have a legitimate championship contender, which I don't think even the most, the most diehard unrealistic Pacer fan is looking at this team saying, oh, yeah, we're winning the title.
So what about Siakam?
Is Siakam good enough to be one of those 2 guys? I know he had that run with Toronto. That's an interesting
Here's
do we think Siakam? How old is Siakam now?
Siakam's 31. See, that's Mike. That to me, that's the real juggling act here for Indiana because you get Siakam with the banking on being able to re-sign him, and I think that they feel they're going to be able to do that. But then do timelines match up, right? Because Halliburton's young, Siakam maybe has 3 to 4 left. You've got to hit it in that moment, right? Or else all of a sudden you're kind of back to square one. I look at Siakam and Halliburton both as really good scorers, but they are situational scorers, and I don't know that they're instinctive scorers. Like Edwards and Luka, when they get the ball, they're just going to score, right? And those guys kind of are thinking through how they're going to score. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean they're half a step down from the guys that you're talking about, but the guys you're talking about are probably the second and third best young players in the entire NBA behind Victor Wembanyama. So almost anyone's stars are going to not look as good as those in comparison. But if there's one thing that the league has shown us in recent years, as opposed to what it was for the longest time, I don't know that you have to necessarily have the single best player to win, although I guess Jokic is that now. It's a very good conversation. I think the combination of Halliburton and Siakam for the next 2 years has a chance to make you a very, very good team. And then the question is, what can we add around them to elevate this at least a little?
Bring back Paul George, Mike. They're going to bring back Paul George, right?
And that's not a thing people are talking about, is it? That I'm missing? I know they're talking about him in Philly.
He keeps doing that podcast, Mike, and the fringe conversations, or that maybe a reunion. I don't know.
Mike, he told Tyrese Halliburton that seeing Halliburton's love from Indiana made him nostalgic. So guess what? There you go, right?
Well, it would be. Look, that would be something else. He would be exactly what they need.
No question. No question.
I don't know that I expect that. Like Brian Windhorst was on Get Up today And he talked about how if the Clippers will give him the max, he will stay with the Clippers. If he doesn't, then you look for a team that can afford $50 million, and the Sixers are that. I mean, that would be a great addition. But if you look at the Knicks, so for the Pacers fans who haven't watched a lot of Knicks games this year, here's what you're going to see in the Knicks tonight. You're going to see one dynamic star in Jalen Brunson, and you're going to see a bunch of really good players who know their roles around him, are well coached, play like crazy. They dive after every loose ball, and they get a big performance every night from someone different. One night it's Hart, and another night it's DiVincenzo, and another night it's going to be somebody else. They have multiple bigs who can play defense. That's what the Knicks are. They're not. They don't have two players better, to your point, than Halliburton and Siakam. Maybe they do when Julius Randle is healthy, but he's not. So, I mean, the Pacers are going to – the Pacer fans listening to this conversation are going to see a very well-coached, very methodical team that right now has no bench because they're all hurt. They're going to play 7 guys. They're going to slow the pace, and they're going to try and beat you to death on the boards. And I don't know that the Pacers can't win this series.
Well, so I was going to say the counter to that, Mike, would be this. In Indiana, you're going to see – let's take Halliburton and Siakam. We've discussed that. But then you've got Miles Turner, who's active defensively. Jalen Smith, who, if called upon, can score in the low post in play defense. They probably give up a little bit there on the inside for sure with what New York is able to do. But then what Indiana has between Nesmith, Nembhard, T.J. McConnell, I think Indiana brings a greater depth of player that can score and run off the bench. So based on that, I'll go to my patented phrase here, like, why not Indiana? When you look at it and you look at the depth that Indiana brings to the table and the fact that they are going to be able to run, I think, maybe not at the 120 pace, but the 110, 115 pace, doesn't that say, just based on numbers and attrition, advantage Indiana? Yeah, I mean, maybe it does. Look, I love that guy Nesmith, and they have a bunch of different guys to run at Brunson. Because Nesmith is big, but I feel like you guys tell me again, you watch them every single day. Like, I feel like he's one of the many guys that the Philadelphia just played Brunson with Kelly Oubre, and, a bunch of guys who were, 6'7", 6'8", but athletic enough to try and stay in front of him at least a little and give him a hard time. There's no question the Pacers are deeper. Here to me is going to be the stat that winds up deciding the series. Do the Knicks dominate the offensive boards and get themselves a bunch of second chance opportunities? Because if you watch the series against the Sixers, if you watch them all year long, that's what they do. They've got Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein and a bunch of other guys who play like crazy. They crash everything in the offensive boards, the constant tip outs and all that kind of stuff. If they're able to do that and get a ton of extra possessions, that's demoralizing to the other team defensively. That's how the Knicks win. If this series is close to even on the boards, then the answer to the question why not the Pacers is there's no reason why not. And if the series is even on the boards, I think it's an even series. I think Hart and DiVincenzo, who I love the way that they're able to shoot the ball, if they're able to shoot consistently and you have to draw Nesmith on one of those two and not have him help on Brunson, and you put Nembhard on Brunson, that's probably advantage New York as well. If those guys are going, and Brunson doesn't need a lot of help to be freed up, right? But that's going to help them.
Here's what I would say, and I used to say this about the Bulls teams I covered, and I would say this 100 times out of 100. I do not think that you start doubling and diving at Brunson in these games. Maybe not until the final, 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. The way the Knicks beat you is if either Hart or DiVincenzo or both of them get hot. There are games that Josh Hart all season long did not shoot threes like this. He had an unbelievable – he played out of his mind in that series against Philadelphia. He doesn't shoot like that. You don't want to let him get into a rhythm. DiVincenzo is a genuinely great three-point shooter, and you do not want to let him get hot. Let Brunson beat you. Let Brunson score 40 points but not get anybody else involved, because then late in the game you start diving people at him. You get the ball out of his hands, and now no one else wants to take a shot. The Knicks will win if Hart or DiVincenzo or both of them play great. Any game in which they play great. They won't win any game in which neither of them plays great, and that is what I'd be trying to stop if I was Rick Carlisle.
Mike, does Indiana next year, and whether it be this is the end of the road for them or they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, whatever it may be, but next season when Benedict Mathurin, who is a special talent and a good, promising young player, but now he has been sidelined with the shoulder injury during this kind of coming of age for this particular unit, is that going to be a challenge for them next year to find out how he merges back in with what they're doing?
I guess. What is the status of him? He's the kid that everyone was telling me, you got to watch, you got to watch, you got to watch. I started watching. I fell in love with him, and then all of a sudden he's gone.
Yeah, he had a shoulder. I can't remember the exact cause of it, but he had a shoulder procedure 2 months ago that shelved him for the rest of the year. He is expected to be back at full strength next season.
Okay. So, I mean, look, I don't think any team gets worse adding really, really good players. So I don't. Will there be an adjustment period? Sure, but the regular season is 82 games long.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, if they're healthy, they have plenty of time to figure that out. I mean, like KD and the guys in Phoenix were talking about not having any time together. I don't think those guys played more than like 15 games together this year. If you give Mathurin and Halliburton and Siakam and that whole group an entire season with a really good coach, which they have, that would be again, observing from a distance, that would be the least of my concerns.
Lastly, Mike Greenberg, our guest. Of course, you hear him from 10 a.m. until noon every day on this radio station for Greeny on The Fan. It has been a number of years. I want to say a handful, maybe 10 years ago. They do kind of all run together for me as well. But this is May in Indianapolis. Pacers-Knicks is special to people. So too the Indianapolis 500. You have been to IMS, and you were able to take in that experience, correct?
Yes.
Thoughts on it?
I actually got to drive on the track, not me driving, but so I want to say it was the first or second year that we were doing Mike and Mike. We came and did the show from there multiple years. We came and did the show from Indy for the Indy 500, I want to say 3 or 4 years. But one of them, the driver Scott Sharp,
yep.
After the show, took us on the track. So me and Mike individually, so one at a time, in the pace car, and he drove me around the track for, I don't know, what felt like 10 years. It was probably like 6 minutes.
Right.
And I've never been more scared in my entire life. I couldn't believe it. He had us out. I mean, he's driving, and if I'm in the passenger seat, if I had reached a finger out the window, I could have touched the wall on the right side when he was on that side. And when we get done, I literally, it was all I could do not to have peed all over myself in terror. And when we got done, I said to him, so is that what it's like driving in the race? And he said, yeah, only we go about 50 miles faster and there's 30 other cars on the track. And I said, okay. So that was when I realized just the extraordinary nature of it. That said, I've never been to the race. We came and did the shows from there, I want to say 3 or 4 years, and we were in Indy for a variety of other reasons as well. I mean, I was there for the Big Ten championship game. I was there for the Super Bowl, whatever year that was, and all that sort of thing. Shout out to everybody at St. Elmo's. But I've never actually gone to the race itself. So I have an appreciation for what it's like to be on the track, racing around it I think we were like at 190 when Scott was driving me, but I've never been to take in the actual spectacle of all of those people in the stands.
Scott Sharp, by the way, was on pole one year and unfortunately hit the wall in turn 1 on lap 1. So it's probably a good thing you weren't in the car with him then, right? But
I'm glad. Let's put it this way. If he had done that beforehand, I don't know that I would have gotten in it. Like that's not a very good sign.
But good dude, really good dude, Connecticut, so from your neck of the woods for sure. Mike Greenberg again, tomorrow at 10 a.m., you will hear him talking about game number 1 between the Pacers and the Knicks, amongst else all the other things that are going on in the world of sports. But, Mike, appreciate it, certainly, and it is a nostalgic time. It's a fun time to go back to. I feel like I'm in college all over again and that I'm listening to the Freddie Jones Band or something because it's the 90s and it's Pacers-Knicks, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's great. It brings back great memories, and let's hope they write a few new really good chapters in the next 2 weeks.
Mike, we appreciate it. We'll be listening
It's
tomorrow.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me, fellas.
All right, Mike Greenberg, again, Greeny, 10 a.m. until noon each day here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Talking about those Pacers teams of the 90s, by the way, the guy that put them all together, Donnie Walsh, who also was the general manager for the New York Knicks, going to join us on the program, and that happens at 2 o'clock.
Are you dealing
Jones Band. Not the only one. Party like it's 1994, baby. It is funny, though, because I think Mike Greenberg is in the same camp that I'm in the fact that, like, kind of as we talked about there, when it comes to Pacers-Knicks, I mean, you got the 2014 series, which was huge, but it was kind of the outlier because it wasn't, it wasn't an annual thing. So those teams of the 90s, even though, as I mentioned earlier, you had 2000 and 99 and, in 98, it's the 94-95 ones that really jump out because that was just the epicenter of the, let's be real, the two big, Jimmy, I'll ask you. I mean, you watched the documentary on it over the weekend, Winning Time. The two biggest characters in the Pacers-Knicks rivalry of the 90s were who? One on each side.
Well, so I think that's partially a trap question. It's Reggie Miller, and then depending on your perspective, it's either Spike Lee.
It's Spike Lee.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, if you're
and
going
that's
off
94, 95,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget when Spike Lee.
Obviously, the other one I was alluding to, the banter back and forth between Starks and Miller is heavily covered as well in the doc. But yes, Spike and Reggie are the ones that you most look back on.
And they had the bet. Reggie Miller and Spike Lee had the bet, which was, and this was, I think, in 90. This would have been in 94. Because it couldn't have been in 95 because the Pacers won the series.
It was 94.
So the 94 bet was that if the Knicks won the series, Reggie Miller had to go visit Mike Tyson in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Pacers won the series, Spike Lee had to feature Marita Miller, Reggie's then wife, in one of his movies. But when Spike Lee came for Game 6 in 94,
I wish I could have been there. Genuinely, because the way they cover it, it's so great.
It was... And I think one of the things that people get confused by is this. Hicks versus Knicks, if I had to guess, I would say that must have been a New York tabloid headline. I still have somewhere, because I was interning in New York in 1994. And I would every morning, I mean, anybody who's been to New York knows this. It's one of the few places left where I would assume this is still the case. The newspapers are tabloid size. I mean, they're magazine size, and that's because in the old days, when you were on the subway train, you basically could only open up the paper the width of your arms instead of all the way upright and out. And so the New York Post, the New York Daily News, the New York Newsday, those are all tabloid magazine-sized newspapers. And they're known, of course, for their headlines and their, the saucy things on the front that sells papers. And I would imagine that's where Hicks versus Knicks was first introduced. But in 94, and I still have the one from somewhere, I still have it. It has Reggie Miller doing the choke sign, and it just says choke. And then another one with Spike Lee on the back cover, and it's blaming Spike Lee for the Pacers, for Reggie Miller's, fueling Reggie Miller. But in 94, when they came back here for Game 6, and Indiana had the chance to close it out, and literally it was this, the Pacers went from, like, the whole city, I mean, like I said, there's signs in the windows of downtown buildings, and they're doing... And back then when City Market was still a huge thing, there's just banners everywhere and homemade posters, and the whole city is like captivated and in love with this team. And then when Game 6, when they had the chance to close it out, like as Indiana does, as we do as a people in Indianapolis here, we went all in and overboard on the Hicks thing. I mean, they're putting tractors out on Market Street and along Delaware Street.
That one's my favorite. There's
hay bales.
There's a picture in the dock of one of those tractors, and it says Pat Riley's limousine.
Yeah. I mean, they basically, Pacer fans were like, if you think we're Hicks, we're really going to play this up 10 times 50, right? But it was so magical because it just brought everyone so together. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And this does kind of feel that way because this is unlike that 2014 team and unlike the 2000 team or the 98 team, this awakens that 94-95 thing because you have a star player for the Pacers that you're hoping this is his introduction to the world stage, even though, to Mike Greenberg's point, the in-season tournament did that a little bit for Tyrese Halliburton and maybe the All-Star game. But this is a young group that has come together kind of before our very eyes, a little ahead of schedule, and this is a true test for them. Because, yeah, the Knicks are banged up a little bit too, and Julius Randle's a great player. But Milwaukee, even though I think the Pacers during the course of the regular season had the upper hand anyway in that series, the reality is that there was a caveat on why they were beating Milwaukee because Giannis was out and Dame Lillard was not 100%, etc. This Knicks team, Jalen Brunson is kind of that guy. I mean, he is a dude for sure. And then you have outside shooters. I mean, but there is so much attention on the narrative on New York because the Knicks are a franchise that is so important to the health of the NBA. The NBA needs the Knicks to be relevant. And Madison Square Garden is historic, and it's New York, and it's the magic of, the right there in Manhattan, the whole deal. And so New York is also coming of age right before our very eyes. And that's going to be the storyline. And so Indiana, it is going to pump itself up by saying that it's like become secondary. You know what I mean? And that same inferiority complex that drove that team and this city in the early 90s, this is what it felt like. This is exactly what it felt like.
There are a number of things you can point to going into tonight as to if the Pacers take care of this, they likely win. Mike Greenberg mentioned it. You and I mentioned it last week. The Knicks thrive, absolutely thrive on offensive rebounds. They led the league in percentage of misses rebounded, so collecting offensive rebounds, and they expanded that last series against Philadelphia. 36% of their own misses last series, they recovered. They had 20 offensive rebounds in the closeout game against Philadelphia. Conversely, the Bucks had 15 in a game that it largely felt like the Pacers controlled. If you allow New York to have that many second chance bites at the apple, they will bury you in this series. Like that cannot happen. I'm not saying you can't have a play or two here or there where it happens, but if the Knicks are averaging 15 to 20 offensive rebounds and converting them into second chance opportunities, you're not going to have a chance. That's where it starts for me. Then additionally, it goes by how do the Knicks defensively play Tyrese Halliburton? Are they as aggressive as the Bucks were in terms of sending double teams in his way, in terms of not allowing him to dictate pace? And if they do try to dictate his pace, how quickly are the Pacers able to get into size advantages that they do have with Miles Turner, with Pascal Siakam? Yes, Hartenstein on the other side for New York is a big body, but he's not Julius Randle. He is not as, towering of a presence in terms of the Pacers can't do that. And if you get past Hartenstein, there's no depth backing him up in terms of high-level depth that would be there if Julius Randle was still a part of this roster. I don't mean to fully, disparage against Mitchell Robinson. I'm just saying in terms of what you've already gone up against, it's not light years better than, say, bodying with Bobby Portis or bodying with Brook Lopez. So there are advantages for the Pacers here, but it starts with offensive rebounds that the Knicks have so sought after and that the Pacers were kind of careless this last series. You keep them off the offensive glass, you're going to have a great chance.
This is why the Knicks are so so hateable. And this is what is going to drive people crazy in this series. And you heard Mike Greenberg talk about it. He's exactly right. How many times, there's nothing more frustrating than when you're watching a game and the team that you're rooting for, you feel like you get a defensive stop.
It's the worst.
And then there's a second opportunity, and then another offensive rebound and a kickback, and a third opportunity, and then boom, and then a dagger three. And you're like, that's the Knicks' bread and butter.
Yes.
And it will absolutely.
And to your point, they have the shooters to do it. Like
Totally.
They miss one. Okay, great. You give them a second bite at the apple, you're getting burnt.
Correct.
I will also say this, like in the final games of that Philly series, the Knicks really blew the games down late. So if you can keep it close, there's a good chance that the Pacers could win just because of mistakes New York will make offensively and defensively as the game progresses in the final minutes.
Yeah, because Philly had two games, right, where although didn't New York have the defense I always have trouble saying his name. DiVincenzo had that game where he hit a three. The Knicks closed one of them with 8 points in like 21 seconds, right?
Correct.
And I'm like, well, I mean, what took so long, right? I mean, come on.
Trips down memory lane.
You're going to do 8 points. You got to shave that bad boy in half. Come on. But I have a feeling that it's going to be a series that is only going to continue to fuel people's hatred for the Knicks. And then there's the Oregon. That just creates like a tension the whole time you're watching it. Dun, 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 dun.
You got against the MSG Oregon.
The guy has like, I like the MSG Oregon actually, but the guy has like 3 things that he plays, and after a while, it's like, can we get like a mix up here of just dun 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 dun? I mean, but then again, people probably feel the same way about the race car sound effects at Market Square Arena for the Pacers, which they still periodically do here. But I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. And to your point, the hatred for the Knicks might grow, but if this series flips, it's an entire generation of Knicks fans that now have that same rejuvenated hatred for the Pacers, because both teams, there's so many parallels here. But one of the most unique ones, both teams are young. Both teams made midseason trades to acquire talent to further their cause to get to this point, and both are without, even though some Knicks fans might, and I don't want to debate this wrongly or rightly, but might argue that they play better at times without Julius Randle. Both are without one of their key pieces. There's no Randle on their side. There's no Mathurin on the Pacers side, and both feel like this is a foundational year for them in terms of a jumping off point. Because regardless of which side you're on, for us it's the Pacers, for Green and his crew it's the Knicks. Yes, most are still going to take Boston, but you're going to get an opportunity. You're going to get an opportunity against the big giant.
It's the seed being planted for hopefully what becomes multiple years here, moving forward, because in those years, 94, 95, 98, the two teams, Pacers, Knicks, truly felt that they were each other's last obstacle to the finals. Obviously, Orlando with Shaq had something to say about that. But don't we all know that Boston's going to win the East, right? I mean,
probably yes, but I
come on. I mean, Boston's really good.
They are. But they look, and this is more narrative than it is factual, because they put a lot of that to bed this year. And yes, the Porzingis injury still matters, but
Jimmy, Boston's going to win the East so that Brad Stevens can leave to come back and coach IU.
I forgot about the script. That's my fault.
Yeah, come on. Donnie Walsh in 10.
This is Robert with Kirby Heating and Air. Go to Kirby.
Do we have tickets to give away later in the program?
Yes, sir.
Sancio Grand Prix, right?
No.
Are we past
Incorrect.
the Sancio Grand Prix tickets?
Yep.
Okay. So we are now giving away tickets to what?
Quals and Carb Day.
Nice.
Every day this week.
Carb Day tickets, man. The Civic Celebration Carb Day, right?
Highly coveted, always.
Great traditions in the month of May. Qualifying, Carb Day, Pacers-Knicks, Pacers-Racers. And that Pacers-Knicks series, a guy that has seen it from both sides. Donnie Walsh will join us next.
Hey, it's JMV for the best in realty. Mark D.
Underway. Been a fast-moving Monday here for us on Query & Company. My name is Jake Query. Jimmy Cook, the other voice you hear on this program. Eddie Garrison, of course, flying the controls for us. Pacers and the New York Knicks, Eastern Conference semifinals, game number 1 tonight from the Garden in New York City. Joining us now on the program, he was the general manager of the Pacers from 1987 to 2006, also was the CEO and president of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, and from 2008 to 2011, he crossed over as the general manager of the New York Knicks in his hometown of New York City, talking about Donnie Walsh, who joins us on the program. Donnie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jake. How are you?
No complaints. I'm excited for this. I'm a little nervous because, I hate to tell you this. I hate the Knicks, and so it makes me nervous. But let's go back to this. I wanted to begin by asking you this. Is it odd for you? Is it sentimental for you? What is your overall thought when you see Pacers-Knicks in a playoff series?
I'm really excited because, I haven't followed the league the way I did when I was doing it and all that. I have followed the Pacers as much as I can, but when I hear Knicks versus Pacers, it brings me back because if you read the amount of competition we had in the playoffs, it got me nervous reading it, and I knew how the games came out. This is big-time basketball now. The Pacers will be going into the Garden, which has the same kind of fans we have up there. I see a real similarity between New York and Indiana when it comes to basketball. New York, everybody plays basketball. Indiana, everybody plays basketball, and we grow up that way. So when you get a series like that going, the fans in New York feel it, and the fans in Indiana feel it, and it produced. I was just reading it. It seemed like every game came down to 2 or 3 points, and every series came down to either the 6th or 7th game, depending on what the schedule was and who had the home court advantage. So I expect that kind of series now because both teams, I think the Knicks are a little older than we are, a little more experienced, and they're defensive-oriented rather than offensive-oriented, which we are. But they're very close in age, and so this is going to be the beginning of the same kind of thing, I think. No matter who wins the game tonight, they'll be back next year. The loser will be back next year, and it'll have to go through the same thing. So, to me, it's a very exciting thing for Pacer basketball and for Knicks basketball, I guess.
When you go back to, Donnie, the teams that you built that really created this rivalry, right? I mean, the 93 and then, of course, the 94-95 with Reggie and Spike Lee and all of that. How much of when you're building a basketball franchise and you're going piece by piece, year by year, do you get caught up in doing it when thinking of the opposition? In other words, when you were building those Pacer teams, were you looking at New York and Chicago and trying to counter what they had in the way your team was designed?
Well, yeah, you almost have to, particularly because by the time we started getting into those situations, we were good enough. I knew we were good enough. So now you'd be looking at the series and you'd think, if you lost, let's say, a series, you'd sit and think, well, what's beating us? And you identify something you need, and so you go out and get it. But before that, I didn't do that. I just tried to put out a team that I thought could win in the NBA, and in effect, you are doing that. In those days, you needed to have a center. You had to have a guy that could really score the ball, and in the clutch, and you had to have a point guard who could get the ball where he needed to, and you had to have a power forward who was, your man that all the other players hid behind when things got rough. And we had 2 of those with Anthony Davis and Dale Davis. So we had the equipment, but so did the Knicks, and so did the other teams you have to play. Chicago, certainly. I mean, when a team has Michael Jordan, you can't get a guy that can counter him. I mean, he did too many things. But it was a really exciting time of basketball. I see it coming again now. I really do.
Donnie, at what point, and you'll have to forgive me, but for Pacers fans and people my age, I was just too young. I lived through secondhand accounts of my brothers and sisters or my mom and dad for those early 90s Pacers teams. But the Winning Time documentary in 2010 helped really reinvigorate Pacers fans my age and understand all the intricacies of that rivalry. One of my favorite moments from that doc, you told the story of when you rushed up to make the announcement of the pick of Reggie Miller, where, a lot of Indiana people at the time wanted Steve Alford selected there. At what point did the fan base turn back to see Reggie and understand, no, wait a minute, this guy's going to be special?
I think, because Reggie played in his first year, and he wasn't, scoring 20 points a game, but he came off the bench because we had a veteran two-guard that could, take some of the minutes and also could teach Reggie some of the tricks you have to know when you're out there. And, the guy that taught him was like Reggie in the sense that he didn't bring the ball up. He didn't start to play. He was coming off a screen and shooting the ball. And that's where that guy's knowledge came into it with Reggie. So, it is a process in that sense that you bring a guy like Reggie who could really shoot the ball and really could shoot it from so far out that it was unbelievable. I tell a story about him that I noticed that one team kept dropping way back on him, when the ball was being brought down the court. So Reggie would just get down to a certain point over half court, and he'd shoot the ball. And he was making shots from so far out, I couldn't believe it. But he had that ability. He knew where he could make the shots from. And in many cases, once he saw the defense do that, he just came down the court. The point guard gave him the ball, and he shot it and it went in. It was incredible, really. But, you learn those things about players the more you're around them. I mean, I had no insight into Reggie's heart and his competitiveness and all that. And I also didn't know that he would, in effect, he never did this verbally or in any outward sense, but that when we needed him, he knew it, and he knew he could do it, and he would do it, And I haven't had a player quite like that ever again. He was just a guy that had that special ability to make shots when you really, really needed them. But
and Donnie,
I was reading the whole Nick Pacer thing, and that brought some of the games back to me. And that's the first time I'd seen him where he thought the Knicks were going to try to bully us, so he became verbally, because Reggie didn't swing fists and all that stuff. He started going at John Starks to begin with. He got him into hitting him with his head or something, and he did a lot of things that would get under the skin of the other team, and then he would take advantage of it.
And the guy, I'm assuming that you're talking about when Reggie was first brought into the league, you already had an established scorer, to your point, in Chuck Person. And I know Chuck Person was traded before those 90s teams, but Chuck Person kind of had that me against the world type mentality.
Yeah, he did.
How much did that carry into Reggie, I guess?
Well, I think they played together a year or two, but it probably carried over because what you find out, whether it's the way Chuck would do it or the way Reggie would do it, Reggie wasn't like a bragger or anything, and neither was Chuck to a degree. But they were really confident in what they could do, and what they could do was shoot, and they really had confidence in it. So that's the way I took a lot of that stuff, was that they were just making sure that they kept themselves that way.
Donnie Walsh is our guest, who, of course, was the Pacers architect of the 90s teams, also general manager of the New York Knicks. But, Donnie, when you talk about a team that is young, which this Indiana team is, the 2024 Pacers are maybe even a year ahead of schedule, but How many go-rounds do you think a team needs to go through the playoffs just for the experience of it? Because how much different is playoff basketball than regular season basketball, and where are they different?
Well, I would say this, that the players themselves are the ones that need to feel that, and they feel it. I can see this team already feels that. They know it's different, and it is a lot different because you're playing against a very good team, a playoff team, and now a better team, that has survived one round, and they are ready for it, and their coaches are breaking down everything you do and trying to set up against it, and that gets more intricate and more intricate the higher up you go, and the players, obviously, the teams rather, the teams get better, so they're better defensively, they're better offensively. And then all of a sudden, if you make it to the finals, you're playing about the two best teams offensively and defensively in the league.
Donnie,
they get to know that pretty quick.
Donnie, you mentioned what goes into team building and, kind of going off of Jake's question of how a team knows how far away they are or being a piece or two away. How hard is it to do what you did in that 94 offseason to know a specific need you have and go get a player like Mark Jackson? How hard is it to identify a missing piece? And then, what do you remember about that acquisition and obviously what it panned into for the Pacers when you went out and got Mark Jackson?
Well, I think what I remember about that was that at some point in the previous year, I just sensed that we don't really have a real point guard. We had a guy that could play point guard and was good at it, but he wasn't a real point guard where he could create the shot for another player by what he did, and he could make the play. He could make the pass, and so I knew Mark, and I happened to have gone up and watched him play. I don't know, in some pickup game or something, where he just happened to be in the game, and then I was convinced that okay, this guy is what we need, because. Mark, if you looked at his body, you didn't think he was fast. But if you saw him in a game, you realized he was really fast. But he didn't use his speed like some of the players today to go to the basket and all that. He used it to get by a guy, and then he knew that somebody would help on him, and boom, he'd have the pass in his head way before. And so that I remember that my thinking process was him. But most of it is like that. Dale Davis, I knew he needed rebounding, and I saw this kid in a game, in a postseason college game that they used to hold all the time. And it wasn't just that he was a great rebounder. It was like when this guy walked out on the floor, everybody got away from him because he was going. He just looked at him, and he was ferocious in a way in his look. As a person, he's not like that. He's very calm, quiet guy. But you shouldn't fool with him, I would say that, because then he would go up and get everything. He'd be blocking shots, and just him coming out on the floor after a while was enough. That was enough. We got our edge there. So I think it becomes not easy. But it's a lot easier than when you pick a rookie, and you see all his abilities and all that, but you don't know until he gets out there and plays against somebody what he's going to be like. But to pick a guy like Mark, I knew what he could do. I'd watched him play a long time. I knew him. So it's a little easier once you're picking veterans. But when you're picking rookies, you won't see the guys going to be that kind of player until you see him in a real game at the end of the game, and can he do what he's got to do? And that is what the judgment's got to be.
Donnie Walsh is our guest. I know that everyone in Indiana knows that you are a New Yorker and that you grew up in New York. You went to Fordham Prep, where you then went collegiately with Larry Brown, where the two of you were at North Carolina as two New York guys. And then you went on to run the New York Knicks after your time in Indiana. But I don't know that I've ever heard or asked this. Did you grow up a Knicks fan?
Not really. I wasn't into Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl was a lot different back then. In a way, it was just becoming popular. But they used to have the games on television. I used to watch all of those games. And you don't know till you go to the pro games how good these guys really are, because, you're judging me as a little high school kid. I'm judging myself and the things that I'm watching them do, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do this, And you start realizing, wow, these guys are men, number one, and they're stronger, and, they have bigger bodies than anybody I've played against so far. So, yeah, I watch them all the time. But I wasn't a fan. I probably was more of a college fan than I was a pro fan.
So when you got the opportunity in 2008, to go and be in the front office for the New York Knicks, was it more surreal for you just because it was New York and that's home, or because it was the Knicks, which is a team that you had worked so long to build teams to get beyond?
It's a weird thing. I thought I'd be nervous, and I wasn't. I went up there, and I just thought, this is going to be great. I got it in my head. And it was because I was around a lot of people that I knew and that kind of thing. And so I was very comfortable in it. And I knew that I had, I only signed a 3-year contract, and I knew that was going to be it. So I wanted to get something done in the first 3 years because they hadn't had a good team when I got there. And they ended up making the playoffs in my last year, and that's when I left. But I enjoyed every minute I was up there. I really did. I have family up there, and it was great for me to be around them. But the job is the job, and you spend 9/10 of your time worrying about what you're going to do with the job.
In terms of this particular playoff matchup, Donnie Walsh is our guest, Pacers and Knicks. Reality is this, Donnie. Indiana's strength this year probably is their offensive fluidity, their ability to score in large numbers and play at high pace. New York, on the other side, probably more defensively minded. In basketball in the NBA in 2024, if you had your druthers, is it better to be an offensively elite team or a defensively elite team? Which one wins in today's NBA?
Well, you've got to be good at both things once you get to where you are now in the playoffs. You have to be good defensively, and you have to be good offensively. Because take the Pacers right now. They are very good offensively, and they keep getting better defensively. Now, what's going to happen is that they're going to run up against a team, maybe the Knicks, who are going to try to slow it down and make it a more reasonable points game. And that won't be in the Pacers' interest. So they have to have an ability to get them at a faster pace than maybe the Knicks want to play. And that gets to be a whole series-long issue. It could be an issue if they're successful. Then that's going to be an issue for the Knicks, because they don't want to play that way. So it's that kind of a mental game that you go through, or an energy game that you go through. But what the truth is that these two teams both have really good personnel. They're young, and we're younger. They've got a lot of energy, and we've got a lot of energy. They're hungry because they want to win. And once you get in the playoffs, that becomes real for the players, the fans, and everybody else. So I'm really looking forward to a really good series. I also think that the fact that the Pacers went through the first round and are playing in that kind of pressure cooker is good for them because they got a lot of years ahead of them. And they might as well get it in their head right now, okay, this is the way it's going to be. and they got to be able to deal with that. They're a brand new team in the sense that all these players have been together about 2 years at the most. And they're young. Now they made a trade for Siakam, who's not in that kind of a picture. But he's really helped them, and he's a good player, and they need him. But everyone else is very young. You know, it's probably their first playoff game or their second playoff game. And I haven't seen it affect them. I've been marveled at these guys, that they have done as well as they have, and they've won a lot of close games, which usually young teams make mistakes in very close games. So I'm really optimistic about them, but I'm also afraid of the Knicks because they're a little bit the same way.
Donnie, nationally, the conversation has been, as we're into the second round of the playoffs now, there's no Kevin Durant, there's no Steph Curry, there's no LeBron James. Now, in this scenario, that's not because of retirement. It's just because they've been eliminated from the playoffs. But from the front office perspective, in 93, when Jordan abruptly retires, what did that do from a planning standpoint, from a, window standpoint? Because you and the Pacers and, Pat Riley and the Knicks at the time, it's like, okay, it's our turn now. Jordan's off the board. What was that offseason like, and did it speed up anything in your timeline when he abruptly retires in 93?
Well, it is, no matter what anybody says, they were glad he retired because he was by and far the best player in the league, and maybe the best player I'd ever seen by that time go through the NBA. Because he was so talented and he had been coached well. He was very talented. There was nothing he couldn't do. And so when the game got on the line, I saw Reggie battle him down here and hit shots that were crazy, and we won the games. But you just knew that if Michael gets the last shot, and he did in this particular game I'm thinking about, he had hit a big shot to bring it to 2 or 3, whatever it was. And then he came down with very little time left and took a shot, I'd say a couple of feet inside half court. And I was sitting under the basket, and that thing rimmed in and rimmed out, and it just fell out at the end. So, that's you're going to have those kind of situations with a guy like Michael. But I would say that's the fans. Don't stop coming to the games because Michael isn't there. There's going to be other guys that do the same type of things. And I think there will be. I've always felt that way.
That was Game 5 in 98, I think, when Reggie hit the three where he did kind of push off, and then Jordan got that shot that...
No, he didn't kind of push off. He really pushed off. You know why he pushed off?
Fair enough.
You know why he pushed off? Because he was coming from the baseline out, and Chicago pre-switched it. So he was coming out, and Michael Jordan was getting ready to grab a hold of him. And they wouldn't have called a foul. I can guarantee you that.
That's true.
And Reggie kind of poked him in the stomach, which made Michael kind of react to it and ran over to the three-point line and hit that three.
And then, man, when Jordan let go of that, 40-footer, I remember thinking down there, holy cow, this isn't really going to happen, is it? And then, there you go.
What I see in the league now are players that have that kind of combination of athletic ability, just basic basketball ability, and they understand the game, that you're going to see that a lot. And particularly because teams are running, because what's happened when you're going to run, you can't have all these big guys slowing you down. So the power forwards have become more athletic, better basketball players. Even the centers have done that.
Are we now at the point, Donnie, where in fact we are seeing positionless basketball? I remember when Jonathan Bender entered the league, and people are like, "Wait a minute, a 7'1" guy that can do this from the outside?" And I know that injuries hurt him, but that was the beginning of no. This is where we may be headed. Are we there now, where for the most part it is positionless?
We are. If you look at the majority of the league, we are. Now, I would qualify that by saying that I don't care when it happens, where it could happen this year. There can be some real big guy. I'm talking about 7 feet plus with a body that comes in there, and he can do all those things. When that happens, we'll all be scrambling. Believe me.
Well, I'll tell you what. To your point, the athleticism, I look at a guy like Anthony Edwards, the competitive nature of guys, and they just keep coming into the league. And so you got to get one while you can. Hopefully the Pacers have found it in Tyrese Halliburton. We'll see. And
he's a good player.
He's very
a very good player.
Right?
Yeah, very good.
All right, so game 1 tonight, Pacers and Knicks. Donnie, enjoy the game, enjoy the series. Hopefully the Pacers come out on top, but I guess you win either way, right?
I'm pulling for the Pacers tonight.
All right.
Really am.
Well, Donnie, we appreciate the time. Enjoy it, all right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, there we go. Donnie Walsh, the former Pacers CEO and general manager of the New York Knicks as well. And look, I remember, Bender's the big one that was the first to me. I have said before, and people think I'm crazy on this, Jimmy. When Jonathan Bender was drafted by the Pacers and they traded Antonio Davis to get Bender, but Bender did things in practices and workouts that were just different. And that was, if he had never been hurt, he was going, and I know people think I'm crazy when I say this, he was going to be Kevin Durant. He was literally Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant, but the knees just gave out, and he was never able to fully show it. But be fun tonight. Now you're off. You've got a court appointment. Is that right?
Yeah, a court appointment. Gotta get out of there. No, it's just a doctor's appointment, and I know you had this happen before. I hate it when it has to conflict with the show, but yeah, I'm out. I'm wheels up now. So.
Well, trust me, and I certainly understand. You've had me do that to get to airplanes. When it comes to a doctor's appointment, sometimes you got to get in when they can get you in. So we certainly understand. Jimmy will be out. Eddie and I will carry us home.
Give me the Pacers tonight, by the way.
What's that?
Pacers take game 1. Give it to me tonight.
Ooh, is that your only pick of the day?
That's my only pick of the day. Give me Pacers outright.
What is the line? Do we know?
Eddie, have you seen it? I've not checked it at all.
The last I looked was like Knicks 5.5 or 6.5, depending on where you look.
We'll look that up. And Eddie, you can do your plays of the day later?
I don't think I have anything for today.
J&V's on remote today, by the way. We'll hand it off to him at 3 o'clock, but we'll let you know where he is going to be as well, because still your chance to go out and watch that show live. You've been listening to Query Company here. Coming up, Eddie and I will not only get back into the Pacers-Knicks, but also we've got tickets to give away for qualifying and for Carb Day at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We will do that in just a few here. Query Company, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Hey, it's Andy Sweeney for Universal.
Thank you to Donnie Walsh for joining us, Mike Greenberg as well, and Mike Chappell. All of those available, Eddie, on the Podcast Center. Is that right?
That is right. Go to 1075fan.com, and it's right there for you.
I noticed, by the way, you're wearing your Colorado Rockies shirt today.
I am.
Now, you said you did go to a Rockies game, right?
We did last year, yes.
Are you a Rockies fan?
No.
I know you're a Reds fan, but who's you're a Reds fan, but who is your, like, the team that you're like, yeah, I've always kind of liked them?
Seattle Mariners.
Okay. You went to a Reds-Mariners game, though, right?
Yeah.
How many people were there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I can't remember what they said.
Was it a decent crowd or?
I would say for a Monday night, yeah, it was halfway decent.
How many weren't high?
That's a very good question.
Also almost impossible to answer, right?
Yeah, because you don't know. At that point, they're probably immune to it.
The Pacers and Knicks, to me, it comes down to this. And we talked about it earlier, but New York, and I've watched a fair amount of the Knicks, their outside shooting, I mean, Mike Greenberg, I think, touched on this, and then Donnie did as well, and the fact that, Indiana is elite offensively, but their defense is coming around. That is true. Their defense clearly is better than it was at the beginning of the year. But what they're going to have to do, and this is a big advantage for New York, the question is whether or not New York is going to be able to capitalize on it. But the Knicks are really good at, and this is what's so maddening about them. When I think back to those teams and where that rivalry and the tension between the two franchises, when I think back to that, it was the rivalry and the hatred for New York, and I know hatred's a ridiculous word, but the disdain, the frustration is probably a better word. A big part of that was just the constant swing of emotions on every possession, because you would think, especially in the Garden itself, there's something about watching your team in the Garden that just feels bigger. It just does. And it just feels like it's a big, huge event and the whole world's watching, and there's the stage for you to try to get it done. And even when the Pacers would go in, 5 years ago in the Garden in November and win, it just feels different, because it's different than going in and winning in Atlanta or going in and winning in Memphis. So there's this already kind of tense feel when you're watching it. And then when you have possessions or swings of the game where things, a possession is breaking down, or you feel like you've got a defensive stop, whatever it might be, and then a second and third opportunity arises, and then boom, as Jimmy said, and he's right, when you give them another bite at the apple and then a big shot is hit, and you feel like you've now wasted this energy and this, investment that you've gotten to stop, and that the game is going to turn. And that's what New York does as well as anybody in the league, quite frankly. Brunson is, that guy is a bulldog player. There is no doubt about it. And when he is able to get into the mid-range, he's really good. And when he's able to attack the basket, he's really good. And obviously he can hit threes. But what New York does well, even though they don't have a deep bench and Julius Randle's hurt, what they do well is create second chance and third chance opportunities for their outside shooters. And what worries me for Indiana is that DiVincenzo, can I just start calling him D squared? I don't know why that's a hurdle for me. Partially because I keep thinking of Devlin DiFrancesco, whose name I've had to say 1,000 times, right?
Yeah.
So DiVincenzo, but when those guys get hot and they get in rhythm, they are a handful. There is no question about that. But they have bigs underneath the basket that just keep possessions alive and are very active. And that's going to be the challenge for the Pacers, because I do think that Jalen Smith is a guy, maybe Isaiah Jackson gets some reps as well, but I think Jalen Smith I would be surprised if we don't see more of him in this series than we saw in Milwaukee.
I know you want to talk about the centers and Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson being such, so aggressive on the glass, but Josh Hart is the one that really stirs the drink with them in terms of their offense on the glass. He loves to get inside. He likes to body his way in there when the shot goes up, tip it out to Brunson or DiVincenzo, and then they just reset and rerun the offense. I think that's the guy that the Pacers have to contain on the glass, because when he gets a rebound on either side, he is able to do a lot of different things for them. He's a creator with the ball in his hands offensively and defensively. He can just bring it up the court, give Brunson a little bit of a blow in terms of that aspect of his game. And I think if you can eliminate Josh Hart, I think gives the Pacers the best chance to succeed.
You hope. I mean, the thing is, I just look at, if you look at the Pacers roster and you look at the number of players they go deep in terms of, guys that are getting significant minutes or that you feel okay getting significant minutes, right? I don't know that, and I hate to say this, but you look at a Doug McDermott. I don't know that anybody's anticipating that Doug McDermott's going to be, maybe that's where you draw the line in the sand, right? Jarris Walker. But other players are able to give them significant minutes and be out there for a while, which one would assume, if New York is not able to go deep in rotation, that advantage Indiana late in games because just fresher legs in general, right? I mean, when you look at the games that they played this year, and especially where the Pacers were able to win, Miles Turner was huge. And Turner is going to be a huge factor in what they're trying to do. Now, the other thing, when you look at them, in two of their games, Jalen Smith, I think, was hurt for one of the games that they played this year. But the other two, Smith was averaging 22 minutes a game against them. This is a guy that didn't really play against Milwaukee. Maybe that helps. But I just think that you're going to have to get frontline help for the Pacers, because you just want to – if you take that away, I kind of like what Mike Greenberg said. I mean, Brunson, is capable of getting them 35, but what do you do to shut everyone else out? And the way that you shut out those two on the outside is by limiting the number of second chance bites at the apple they get. I mean, that's what I would say.
And the part for me that I'm fascinated to see how it'll work out is the Pacers bench, because you look at New York, Josh Hart plays 46 minutes a game. Jalen Brunson plays 44 minutes a game.
That's what I mean. Eventually, it's got to wear out, right?
Yeah. Anunoby plays 42 minutes a game. So if you're the Pacers bench and you're TJ McConnell, if you're able to dictate the pace and run it up and down the floor a little bit, wear those guys out, and by the end of the game, Pacers starters will be fresh because they have the ability to not have to play their three best players that much.
So, Eddie, we have tickets to give away for what exactly are we giving away here?
We are giving away tickets for qualifications for the Indianapolis 500 and for Carb Day.
Now, you have been to qualifications, correct?
That is correct.
You have been to Carb Day, right?
That is also correct.
Do you take your shirt off at Carb Day?
Nope. I do not.
Do you have some of the Miller Lights at Carb Day?
I do.
I love Carb Day, man. I love the whole month. I love and I get such a kick out of this, and I mean this in a good way. Let me read you a text that I got earlier, and then I'll let you know how we're going to give the tickets away here, okay? Or we'll let you pick. But I got a text earlier, and I always get a kick out of these, okay? Hey, Jake. My daughter has been hit by the F1 bug. This is very common because of the Netflix show, right? And by the way, Formula One over the weekend, McLaren getting the win in Miami. According to the NFL, 3.5 million people there for the Formula One race. But Formula One, I get it, man. Formula One is massively popular right now. No question about it. And it was a cool event yesterday in Miami. But, Jake, I live in Fishers with my wife and two daughters. My oldest daughter, a soon-to-be graduating senior at Fishers High School, has been hit by the F1 bug. Like most humans on the planet, we can't necessarily afford that stuff, but we've got the greatest spectacle in racing right here in our backyard. So she and I are attending our first 500 together here in a few weeks. I'm very excited for sure. We have tickets in turn 3. Here are my 3 questions. Now, these are the 3 most common things I get asked right now, Eddie. Ready? What time should we get to IMS on race day? Number 2. That's the first question, right? Number 2, where's a good area to park? And number 3, as first-timers, what are the things that we have to do as we wander the grounds both before and during the race? Thanks in advance for your input. I will be calling that person when we're done with the show to give them my advice. But this is what I love about it. It is an all-day event, and I think that people need to understand if they're going to the Indianapolis 500 for the first time that it is an all-day event. The race, the green flag is at what time? 11:30, I think?
I have no idea. I haven't looked that far ahead.
I think that's right. I'll have to look it up. They move it a little bit from year to year, but I think it's 11:30. You need to leave home. If you're coming from Fishers, you got to leave at 7 a.m., right? And I know that people are like, wait, what? It's only 30-minute drive. No. Like, it's totally different. Now, I have the world's most fail-proof, impressive route that I'll be giving. It's my own secret route. My own secret route that I will divulge when I call the person there to give them. Now, the other thing is this, Eddie. Do I give the person, since they're the first one to ask me this question this year and they're first-time attendees of the race, and I love that a senior in high school is interested in the Indy 500. I love it. And I love that her dad is willing to take her. Do I give them my fail-proof direction into turn 3, or do I simply say to them, meet me at my house and ride in with me, and I'll drive you in and drive you out? Now, which one do I go with here? They're the first ones to ask me this year.
I think you give them the option and be like, and these are the parameters in which we leave in the Jeep. Can't throw up in it after the race. Rule number 1. Number 2, we leave before the sun rises. Number 3.
Do that, though.
Really?
No. 8:30 or 9 a.m.
I guess when you have the Jake Curry pass, it makes it easy.
Well, so you've heard me tell this story before. But with the radio network, we get an escort in. And I never did it because I'm like, I have my fail-proof plan, right?
Yeah.
And then one year, I'm on 30th Street. I've told this story before in the air several times, but I'm on 30th Street. This was in 2014. And it's like 8:30. We have a meeting, I think, at 10. And we're not going anywhere. I mean, I'm right there just north of the North 40, about to go in 9A, but we're not moving. So I get out of my car. There's a state trooper. He's got a golf cart right there. And I'm like, listen, like, what's going on? And he says, well, we've had an incident. I'll just leave it at that. We've had an incident, and we've had to close the entrance. So for now, the entrance is closed. And I said, I get that, but here's the thing you don't understand. Like, I have to get in there. And he says, well, and he points to the line of cars and says, everybody here has to get in there. I said, no. I don't, but I'm on the broadcast for it. And he says, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I can take you in with my golf cart, but what are you going to do with your car? Like, that's also a good question. Now, the two guys behind me see this happening, get out, and the one guy says, well, you've got to go in and do the radio broadcast, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, and I said, look, he can take me in, but there's nobody else in my car. Can you park my car? So the two guys in the car behind me, one of them says, I'll park your car. Where do I take your keys? And I said, you're going to take my keys to the pagoda. And the guy goes, no problem. We're sitting in turn 1 anyway. It's right on our way. And I'm like, blind faith here. This is why the Indy 500 is the greatest race in the world, and this city is the greatest city in the country. So I go in, I give him my keys, I get everything I need. They take me in on a golf cart. After the race, I go back to the pagoda, and sitting on the table in security command is my keys with a note that says, here's where you're parked, and boom, there's my car. I've never, to this day, known who that guy was. I would love to know because I owe him like a steak dinner times 20. But ever since then, I've now taken advantage of the escort because you kind of don't have a choice.
I've actually never heard that story.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
By the way, Beyond the Bricks tonight, you and Mike Thompson.
8 o'clock tonight, Mike and I will be doing Beyond the Bricks. It is our first installment of it, and we will be doing it from 8 until 9 o'clock each night this week on a variety of the different stations depending on the layouts with Pacer games, whether it be here, WIBC. But we look forward to doing that tonight. We'll come back and put a tie on all of it and get maybe Eddie's picks of the day. We'll do that on the other side.
Hey, it's JMV for the best in realty, Mark D.
So we have a pair of tickets to give away for qualifying and then Carb Day, correct, Eddie?
That is correct.
And we're going to do what number caller in this extravaganza of a giveaway that we're doing?
I don't care. You got any numbers in mind that stick out to you?
You know my favorite number, don't you?
1 because you're one of one.
I mean, I think we all know, right? My favorite number is 3. I'm the third kid. My birthday's the 3rd. Bobby Unser in car number 3 won his 3rd Indy 500 in the first time that I went to the race, and Jay Edwards is the greatest basketball player to ever live. So caller number 3, how does that work?
Works good for me. I'll start talking to him now.
All right. By the way, J&V James has just walked in. John is where today, James? Do we know? He is on remote, obviously, right?
He is at a charity golf outing.
That's right. He's at charity golf outing, I believe. Is it at Crooked Stick where he is? Okay, I thought he was going to be I thought he was at a golf out, or I thought he was going to be at a restaurant where people would be able to go, but he is at a charity fundraising golf outing, so J&V will be up next. And again, a reminder tonight, Pacers and Knicks, you can hear it here. We will talk about that and more tomorrow. Stephen Holder will join us as well. Again, thanks to Mike Chappell, thanks to Mike Greenberg, thanks to Donnie Walsh. Back at it noon tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.